Zhang Wanjing confirmed the alias and watched the spirit realm map finish loading. The interface labeled Night God, Yuling Tunnel No 0079, and set difficulty to level 5. It flagged the run as single-player death type and forbade non-spirit items. The platform beneath him dissolved, and his senses blurred into the cavern. Stacked data panels described the tunnel's failed excavation and missing workers. They noted one survivor returned, but he spoke only the same warning. A crimson glyph pulsed, then the display flashed a harsh command. Bright letters formed the words, "Don't go into the temple." Zhang Wanjing stared as the cavern light tilted toward that warning. Zhang Wanjing confirmed his alias and watched the spirit realm map complete loading. The interface labeled Night God, Yuling Tunnel No 0079, and set difficulty to level 5. It flagged the run as single-player death type and forbade non-spirit items outright. Beneath him, the platform dissolved, and his senses blurred into the cavern depths. Stacked data panels detailed the failed excavation, missing workers, and one returning survivor's warning. A crimson glyph pulsed, and the display flashed bright letters forming a blunt command. The words warned him not to enter the temple, and the cavern light lined toward them. He stared down into that void, the phrase "This is looming," then choked and braced. The interface had warned him not to enter the temple before the platform dissolved. Zhang Wanjing peered into the cavern and asked whether the opening was a tunnel. He compared it to the Yuling Tunnel from the urban legend, but rejected that match. A pulse of vertigo seized him, and his hand flew to his forehead. He forced himself to remain calm while sweat formed and his body shook. Memory offered no clear match, and the entrance felt neither modern nor ordinary. He gripped his abdomen, tried to recall prior visits, and concluded this was supernatural. An interface had warned him not to enter the temple before the platform dissolved. Zhang Wanjing peered into the cavern and compared the opening to the Yuling Tunnel from urban legend, but found no match. A pulse of vertigo seized him, and he pressed a hand to his forehead. The voice had assigned 2 tasks: survive 3 hours and explore the spirit realm. He deduced exploring meant entering this tunnel, and that surviving implied extreme danger. He forced calm, steadied his breath, and accepted the mission because a reward must follow. A warning appeared telling him not to enter the temple before the platform dissolved. Zhang Wanjing stepped forward and noted the status panel's reward classification. He realized his class was Night God and that the black card likely signified a reward. He recalled Brother Bing's warning about handling it and the referenced danger level. The idea of a death-type spirit realm unnerved him. He steadied his breath and moved on. The tunnel widened into a steep shaft lined with hanging lamps and power cables. He descended into the cavern and braced for whatever came next. After he descended into the cavern, Zhang Wanjing kept his breath and stepped forward. A whisper moved softly among the hanging lamps and the power cables. He froze when a dark shape detached from the wall and approached. He told himself it could not be real, yet his spine tightened. Small flames licked the figure's bare toes as it slowly lifted them. The shape rose fully, and its fingers slowly lengthened into thin claws. When it turned, the dim light showed a skull-like face and hollow eyes. A wide, silent mouth gaped, and the cavern answered with a bursting sound. After the hollow mouth had opened, more shapes peeled from the cavern wall and moved forward. They proved to be desiccated corpses with glowing red eyes and torn clothing. Zhang Wanjing froze, then recoiled in sudden fear and staggered backward. A sharp cry escaped him as the figures closed ranks and advanced in an unbroken line. One taller marcher stepped into the light and halted, then a pale skeletal hand extended toward Zhang. The cave seemed to press closer as he fell back and stared at the reaching fingers. After the cave mouth opened, more shapes peeled from the wall and stepped forward. They were desiccated corpses with glowing red eyes and torn clothing. Zhang Wanjing froze and staggered backward as one figure extended a pale skeletal hand toward him. He felt the cave press in and cried out when the line closed. Confused, he noted a corpse did not pursue him. His gaze narrowed and he spotted another beyond the light. He turned and found multiple figures now standing between him and the tunnel. He realized he was surrounded. After the cave mouth opened, desiccated figures stepped from the wall with glowing red eyes. Zhang Wanjing froze as one extended a pale skeletal hand toward him in warning. The figures closed ranks around him, but did not pursue him further. Instead, they turned and began pointing toward the tunnel's exit with stiff motions. Zhang staggered backward and asked aloud why they were not attacking him. Nearby companions watched, unease reflected in their postures, following the pointing gestures. Far ahead, they pointed at a low building, resting beneath a clear starry sky. After the cave mouth opened, skeletal figures emerged from the wall with red eyes. Zhang Wanjing froze as one raised a pale hand toward him. The figures closed ranks but did not pursue. Instead, they pointed stiffly toward the tunnel's exit. Zhang staggered back and asked why they did not attack. His companions watched in uneasy silence and followed the pointing gestures. Far ahead, they saw a low building resting beneath a clear starry sky. A single red light bloomed above that building, and a thin glowing tendril uncoiled and drifted down toward them. After the tendril unfurled, the group left the cave and moved toward the distant building beneath the stars. They traversed a narrow rocky slope lit by the faint red glow. Snow and slick stone made each step treacherous, so their feet skidded and found poor purchase. Zhang Wanjing kept low and advanced cautiously, cloak brushing rock, then broke into a run when the path opened. Wooden planks and ruined rails creaked underfoot as they descended. His companions followed in uneasy silence, drawn by the single red light and the tendrils pulled toward the low building. They emerged from the cave into a slit of night sky and cold rock. Zhang Wanjing kept low, then broke into a run along the slope. Skeletal miners crawled from the dark and advanced toward him. Their faces glowed with lamplight and teeth bared in hunger. He remembered the panel's warning about the solo death-type spirit realm. Logically, he expected them to attack, but instead they pointed the way. He staggered, terrified and confused why they freed him and guided him. Zhang Wanjing weighed the miner's gesture and chose to follow rather than fight or flee. He reasoned it might be the correct mission route or a trap, but escaping the dried corpses had priority. He ran down a moonlit mountain path beneath a thin crescent sky. The forest was unnaturally quiet without insect sounds. The silence tightened his chest as he pressed deeper. The trail funneled into a shadowed trench between trees. Rain-like streaks in close shadow cloaked the path while he moved forward, alert for ambush. Zhang Wanjing accepted the miner's route and ran down a moonlit mountain trail beneath a thin crescent. Rain streaked through the quiet forest as the path narrowed into a shadowed trench. He stepped onto cracked pavement, his shoe brushing wet grass, then walked between trees with a measured stride and a tool at his hip. A thin web shimmered in the gloom with a single drop clinging to it. Beyond the web, he found a coiled tangle of roots or cord laid like a snare across the trail. He stopped and scanned the way ahead. Zhang Wanjing stepped over the snare and entered a ruined wooden hall framed by pillars. The interior was dark and empty, a worn altar visible beneath hanging beams. Moonlight outlined his form as he muttered that this was a temple aloud. He froze when a sharp thought urged him to wait, sweat beading on his brow. A holographic prompt flashed words about a handling manual with special instructions near his vision. According to the hint from that strange voice, he concluded he should not enter the temple. He held his ground and listened. Zhang Wanjing stood under moonlight outside the ruined temple after avoiding the snare. He read the holographic hint and decided to wait rather than step inside. He scanned the courtyard and recognized the site miners had led him to. A hard thought hit him. There were two distinct main quests and they had not aligned. Panic tightened his chest as he weighed options. He imagined merging both objectives to reduce risk. He resolved to treat the mission as a single survival trial. He would explore the temple for 3 hours and ensure his own survival. Zhang Wanjing weighed his options beneath the moon outside the ruined temple. He recalled the warning hint and blamed Bing for the deadly clubhouse choice. Panic tightened his chest as he imagined certain death both forward and back. He forced himself to breathe, swallowed, and resolved to explore despite the risk. He lifted his foot and crossed the threshold in quiet steps. The courtyard lay shadowed and spider-webbed. He paused at the doorway to scan the interior and prepared to search for danger. Zhang Wanjing stepped into the courtyard and froze beneath the temple's lit windows. He noticed a light burning behind carved lattice and flinched at the sudden signal. Grass whispered near his feet, and he watched a dark shape slide past. He peered through blades and strained to listen for movement inside the ruins. Every sound seemed magnified, and his pulse tightened against the thin night air. He turned slowly and scanned the shadowed path, wondering if something moved toward him. He kept his steps soft and his breath steady, unsure whether he had actually heard anything. Zhang Wanjing moved through the reed-choked courtyard and froze beneath the temple's lit windows. He noticed light behind carved lattice and listened as grass whispered around his feet. He told himself the first step to seeing a ghost was hearing things and strained. Soft, measured steps seemed to fall through the dark and tighten the silence. Sweat gathered on his brow as he weighed whether to go inside. A distant voice taunted vengeance as a shadow shifted deeper inside. He held his breath and hesitated at the threshold. Zhang Wanjing had paused beneath the temple's lit lattice when a voice jabbed at him. The anonymous speaker mocked his little brother and study habits from just off panel. Footsteps echoed as the insult landed and rippled through the reeds. Panic tightened Zhang's shoulders, sweat beaded on his face and his pupils widened. He spat a curse and lurched into motion. A raw scream tore from his throat and reverberated through the courtyard. Dark footprints dotted the ground where his feet struck as he ran for the carved door and lighted threshold. Zhang Wanjing vaulted through the carved doorway into the dark courtyard and fell hard. His feet struck stone and dark footprints tracked his path. He skidded, spat blood, and clawed for balance on the wet floor. Pain doubled him, but he pushed upright and staggered forward. The night air cut at his lungs while he gasped for breath. He collapsed to a crouch and steadied himself with trembling hands. When silence settled, he moved to the threshold, drew a short sword, and sat facing the full moon. Zhang Wanjing had vaulted through the carved doorway and fallen onto the courtyard floor. He skidded, spat blood, and forced himself upright while moonlight cut his lungs. He steadied with trembling hands, drew a short sword, and listened for footsteps along the wooden hall. He noticed the footsteps had stopped and believed he might be safe as sweat tracked down his temple. A sudden creak echoed from the floor, and he flinched toward the sound. Candlelight revealed pooled wax, a skull, and stacked books on the table by the shelves. He understood silence no longer meant safety and braced for movement. He had braced for movement, but the hall remained still under the torchlight. A colossal silhouette rose behind the hearth, carved horns cutting the flame's glow. Two smaller figures stood on either side, with doll faces fixed forward. He saw the stone eyes in close-up panels, empty and unnervingly smooth. A single syllable escaped him. He muttered, "Ah," and shifted his weight. Sweat beaded along his brow as he felt their gaze fix on him. He kept his hand near the short sword and waited for sound. Zhang Wanjing had braced for movement, but the hall remained still beneath the torchlight. A colossal figure rose behind the hearth, with horned features cutting the flame's glow. Two doll-faced statues stood at its sides, with expressionless faces fixed forward. Zhang Wanjing examined the stone eyes in close-up panels. Their surfaces were smooth. A single syllable escaped Zhang Wanjing, and he shifted his weight toward the altar. Sweat beaded at Zhang Wanjing's brow as he kept his hand near the short sword. The statue loomed over the altar, while candles flickered along its base. A speech bubble read, "Up close, it looks even more massive." Zhang Wanjing felt their gaze fix on him and waited for any sound. Zhang Wanjing advanced while the hall stayed motionless under wavering torchlight. A horned figure rose behind the hearth and cut the flame's glow. Two doll-faced statues flanked the main figure with blank faces fixed forward. Zhang stepped closer and inspected the stone eyes in tight panels. Their surfaces were smooth and unyielding. He let out a single soft syllable and shifted his weight toward the altar. Sweat beaded at his brow as his hand remained near the short sword. The statue towered over the altar while candles flickered along its base. Zhang felt that gaze settle on him and held his position. Zhang Wanjing lingered beneath the carved frieze and studied the statue's ruined hands. The hall remained dim while his eyes traced the stone grooves and the statue's pose. He wondered what the goddess might once have held and thought it likely hid a clue. He moved to a nearby pillar and scanned its base for inscriptions or hidden marks. Sweat gleamed at his temples as he measured possibilities. He kept his hand near his short sword and listened for any sound that might betray movement while he searched. Zhang Wanjing read the worn script on the floor and recognized its age. The inscription dated the temple to the early Ming dynasty, 500 years past. He startled at the thought, but then noticed the hall's candles burning freshly. The temple appeared abandoned, yet someone had recently tended those nearby flames. He moved down the central aisle, listening for movement and searching shadows for an intruder. A flicker reflected in his widened eye, showing a small figure by a candle. He froze, pulse quickened, and wondered what that faint shape could be. Zhang Wanjing crouched by the altar and studied the burned script pages and margins. He noticed fresh candle wax and a distinct tool mark near the book binding. An internal label matched formatting used by the construction team in local records. He weighed two explanations silently. The script realm might have come before the project. Alternatively, the writings could be a later fabrication planted during renovations by workers. Either way, the discovery increased his danger and demanded caution and information. He pressed his palm to his mouth and calculated risks, needing more clues fast. After a moment of tense silence, he steeled himself and decided to proceed into the hall. Zhang Wanjing had crouched by the altar and examined the burned script and margins closely. He noted fresh candle wax and a clear tool mark near the book binding. He considered two explanations and kept his fear and calculations to himself quietly. He then moved deeper into the dim hall to search for more clues. The body slumped against the wall had sunken features and torn clothing. Zhang Wanjing checked the corpse and identified broken ribs and shoulder fractures. He noticed something tucked in the victim's chest pocket and reached for it. He withdrew a paper talisman, stamped with red characters, and froze at its implication. Zhang Wanjing had examined the talisman and stepped back into the candlelit corridor. Figures clustered in the smoke, and he heard murmured warnings from unknown voices. A stern elder stepped forward and spoke about vanished households and uneasy omens in measured tones. Zhang Wanjing listened without replying. The candles cast slow shadows across faces, and the crowd pressed closer. An oppressive feeling tightened in his chest and made him breathe shallowly. That evening he ate in silence and waited alone in his room for sunset. Since the disappearances began, he had not looked forward to the coming night. Zhang Wanjing inspected the torn papers under dim light and frowned at their abrupt end. He recalled a senior worker who had hidden a note and wondered if the fragment was an important clue about missing households. He considered whether completing a second main quest might require leaving the temple and following the rumored tunnel one worker had used to survive. He paced the empty corridor, weighed the risks of confronting temple dangers, then eased a door open. Silence met him beyond the threshold, and he hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to step outside. Zhang Wanjing listened to his own shallow breathing and felt the air tighten beyond the doorway. He judged the presence outside as unusual and dangerous, but waiting felt worse. He tightened his grip and took a steady step into the night. The temple threshold gave way to ruined corridors and open sky. He moved along cracked tiles past collapsed walls, keeping low and alert. Stars stood cold above while distant shadows shifted. He advanced slowly toward the source he hoped to find, weighing every footstep against unknown threats and the need to follow the torn papers led. Zhang Wanjing paused on the roofline and scanned the ruined compound beneath a cold sky. He dropped down the cracked tiles and moved along shadowed corridors toward a dimly lit hall. Stars wheeled overhead as he kept low and listened for any movement beyond the walls. He threaded through an arched passage and forced open a jagged entrance into the courtyard. There he found a dark mass of discarded forms piled beneath a splintered wall and standing refuse. He bent to read a torn caption that noted the tunnel path had been lined on the way here. Zhang Wanjing moved into the courtyard and inspected the discarded remains beneath the broken wall. He noticed several skeletons, and the shoulders were strangely intact despite other damage. Then distant red help calls floated from the tunnel mouth and multiplied around the arch. He froze and crept closer along the path, telling himself the archway looked dangerous. The cries sharpened and turned clearly human. He realized someone was actually shouting for help, and a distinct voice cried out, "Brother." Zhang Wanjing had moved into the courtyard and inspected the remains beneath the broken wall. He noticed several skeletons and found the shoulders strangely intact despite other damage. Red cries for help rose from the tunnel mouth and multiplied around the arch. He froze and crept closer along the path, telling himself the archway looked dangerous. The cries sharpened and turned clearly human until one voice cried, "Brother." Zhang steadied himself, then called Bing and vowed to act if he survived. He threatened to send their so-called study materials to Uncle Lei to force explanation. His face flushed and he clenched a fist with stubborn determination to provoke a reaction. Zhang Wanjing advanced beneath the broken arch and examined the exposed remains by lamplight. The skeleton lay complete, except for a shattered scapula on one side. He compared that fracture with the main hall corpse and marked the similarity as suspicious.